Hi, everyone, and thanks for joining us on the Week in Review. I'm Amanda Vinicky. Republican candidate for president Donald Trump visits Chicago for an appearance that quickly turns contentious.
It's a very nasty question. I have answered the question. I have been the best president for the black population since Abraham Lincoln. That's my answer.
Trump tells the National Association of Black Journalists that his opponent is playing up being black for political benefit. Their matchup is just about a done deal. Delegates to the Democratic National Convention vote virtually to make Vice President Kamala Harris their nominee. But who will Harris choose as a running mate?
This may be the 73rd time that you and your colleagues have asked this question. I'm not going to talk about those conversations.
Illinois Governor J.B. Pritzker stays coy, even as allies go to bat on his behalf. Don't count the Chicago Teachers Union among them. Meanwhile, weeks after Sonya Massie was killed in her own home by a sheriff's deputy, pressure intensifies for politicians at all levels of government to take action in her name.
And I ask for your forgiveness. I ask Miss Massie and her family for forgiveness. I offer up no excuses. What I do is offer our attempt to do better.
Massie's family and civil rights leaders say an apology isn't going to cut it.
We said to the state of Illinois, until we get full justice for Sonya Massie, we rebuke you in the name of Jesus.
We rebuke you in the name of Jesus, Sonya Massie's final words. Now to our Week in Review panel to talk about all of that and more are Lynn Sweet from the Chicago Sun-Times, Gregory Pratt of the Chicago Tribune, Michael Liptrot from Southside Weekly, and Sarah Karp of WBEZ. Now let's begin with the former president and potential next president, Donald Trump's visit to Chicago. And Michael, to you, because you attended the NABJ convention. Some folks didn't want President Trump there at all. So before we get to the content, what is your take on the controversy of whether this was an appropriate venue or not?
Controversial indeed, Amanda. And from the announcement that Trump was coming Monday night, leading up to his talk Wednesday around noon, it was definitely a lot of controversy. And as I see it, there was two sides at odds. The traditional side of more so older NABJ members, where this is just what you do at NABJ. Every election cycle you invite candidates from both sides, allowed them to come address the journalists and let their side be known. And that side is at odds with a more progressive, younger demographic that was seeing it as Trump being the exception to the tradition. And that even though NABJ has opened its doors to previous presidential candidates to both sides, more progressive-leaning people viewed it that Trump should have been an exception, and that progress with that tradition would have been to rule Trump out for his track record when it comes to the black community.
Basically, that this is supposed to be a convention where it's a safe space, a gathering, a unifying event, and that given his record, Trump is the opposite. So I know
family reunion, you could say.
I know, Michael, that it can be awkward for journalists. We try to, often stay objective. Do you have a take on where you come on that you want to share? And it's okay if not.
It's a question, like you said, objectivity. And from seeing my colleagues and just their reaction to it, that led me to question a lot, because as journalists, objectivity is something that's supposed to be the guiding light, the eye on the sparrow that we're following in our careers. And seeing that when it comes to things that are so controversial, that hit at who you are and the fundamentals of what you stand for, it's hard for a lot of people to stay silent. And it's something where I sat back and I thought a lot about what this means, because in fairness of the tradition, Donald Trump was invited and given a platform just as any other presidential candidate would. However, the need for that to be considered and to hear out people who were wanting an exception to be made for him, and not this happening so last minute. And that really is what took people by surprise and hurt people's trust in the convention.
And questions, of course, as to whether this was fair because it was so last minute. And it's my understanding that there are talks to have some sort of appearance by presumptive Democratic nominee Kamala Harris coming up soon. Let's move a bit more to the content and to Lynn. Actually, why do you think President Trump accepted this invitation. What did he expect to get out of this appearance?
Well, he did it because it was a chance. I don't think it's a hard one.
But he didn't do it last time around.
No, because he wasn't running against a person who may be the second black president of the United States and the first female president of the United States. So I don't think it was hard to figure it out. And it is often at these national conventions that they do host candidates in presidential years on it, and they say in programs, invited so-and-so and so-and-so, subject to confirmation of schedules. So the reason he came, though, should have been a signal to himself that you come to achieve something, and that is to either to get more votes than you would have had you not come. And I probably our audience is kind of familiar, you tell me if you want to get into it, that the way he acted and his contentious behavior, the things he said, the accusations of Vice President Harris turning black is just something that is abhorrent as to how he said it and the frame he did. It's more than a dog whistle. I don't know what a stronger word. It's like a lion whistle. It is a huge thing. So the calculation is his base hurt him, but his base is with him. So whatever his political aim was, he didn't achieve it, which means that his campaign or him made some mistake here, especially in not understanding the ground rules that somebody agreed to.
I want to give other folks an opportunity to weigh in, but briefly here, let's just hear what you were talking about. We have that clip.
She was always of Indian heritage, and she was only promoting Indian heritage. I didn't know she was black until a number of years ago when she happened to turn black, and now she wants to be known as black. So I don't know, is she Indian or is she black?
She is always identified as a black woman. She went to a historically black college.
I respect either one, but she obviously doesn't.
All right, Greg?
Well, one of the interesting things, the Tribune, Alice Yin, had a really good story today about what was his goal, and one of his main goals, and because he kept repeating it, he's been trying to appeal to black people by dividing them on the subject of migrants and saying the Democrats are. It's a pretty nasty bit of business, but it's a very divisive attempt to say you're mad about the migrants and this is the Democrats, and it's a talking point that he kept returning to. I think that aside
they're hurting you economically, taking jobs.
And aside from attacking Rachel Scott, I think his first substantive comments were about that issue, and that's what he was going for, and that's the strategy.
But did it get drowned out by everything else?
I think that, in politics, which is about addition, I think questioning whether the black woman is black was probably not productive for him. So, yes, it got drowned out.
And Sarah, you wanted to weigh in as well.
I just wanted to say something really quick. I thought when I heard that he was going to NABJ, my initial thought was it makes perfect sense because he actually has been gaining in the black community prior to Harris being announced as the presumptive nominee. And it's kind of interesting, a lot of the young black people that I know, like my sons and my son's friends, they're not going to vote for Trump because they might be disowned. But they talk about their friends. A lot of their friends are Trump supporters. I have a son who's at Howard who says that there is groups of Trump supporters at Howard. And I thought, of course, he wants to go and sort of talk to that group. Now, he probably went and turned them off and actually showed some of the people who are considering voting for him probably now are reconsidering. So he probably did the opposite. But I do think that it was very strategic because he saw an opening. He knows he has some support in the black community that he didn't have. I think only 8% of black people voted for him. Before, I think he sees that he has an opening.
But he saw remember, everything changed when Biden dropped out in the calculation. You're not, instead of running against an 81-year-old white man who has, that was scene one. It's over. And he couldn't pivot smart enough to take into account of what we're all saying, to do something to get out of that program more votes rather than even less.
And it's something, Greg, you bring up a great point. The idea of politics being addition, because yes, Trump can say that he came to NABJ and Kamala Harris did not. That is where the buck stops. Because when you think about a productive conversation, trying to heal the relationship between the conservative party, the Trump party, with black people, coming in to what is a family reunion for black journalists and insulting a moderator initially at
Right
the
off the bat.
start,
Right off the bat,
to
yeah.
start at that level and at that energy and maintain it throughout. Nothing productive can be sought through
But there's
that.
more to that story. President Biden had agreed to come. So it might have been productive if the organizers had let that out. That I mean, when you talk about presidential stops or vice president, it's never for sure until the day they say they're coming. But he had been slated to come. So when he stopped being a contender, it changed, and Harris was off and running in, what was it, day 8 of her campaign.
That means so much more, too, when you think about the fact that
They had both in the beginning, yeah.
at this point, with everything happening so last minute,
Yeah.
Kamala Harris, less than 2 weeks of being a presumptive nominee, every day means so much more to her than Donald Trump, who served 4 years in office, had almost 4 years off. For him to now come, for Kamala Harris to make that journey and add this to her schedule meant so much more on the day of Sheila Jackson's funeral, on the day that she was set to speak.
Before.
Day before, yeah.
Point being that there's going to be, I think, a lot of further discussion amongst the National Association of Black Journalists about how this was handled, and we'll see the ramifications
by the way,
going forward of the campaign.
You have a point. She was at Sigma Gamma Rho in Houston, a historically black sorority. I mean, so given, if you're talking about base constituencies, NABJ, Sigma Gamma Rho, one of the big
I believe, I believe that or Zeta Phi Beta. One of them. Yeah.
It's the Divine Nine.
Right.
So
National
it's
Line.
not it was an abundance of choices.
To have a window into all of the invitations that
Yes.
presidential candidates receive, I cannot imagine. But open one to come on this program any old time if you happen to be listening, President Trump or Vice President Harris. So just, Lynn, briefly, could you assess, you mentioned this a little bit, but I want to get into that. How much has the dynamic of the race changed since Democrats got behind Harris instead of Biden?
From gloom to bloom.
Ooh, gloom to bloom.
Yes.
You came in with that preset today.
No,
You had
I
that
did
in your
not.
pocket. All right.
Trepidation to elation. I could just do this, but here is the point. The point is that you had people who are going to come kind of to a wake, and now you're coming to a wedding. That's how fast things changed. I never doubted for a minute that if Biden dropped out, Harris would have to take the baton. It was insane to think anything else would happen. But what is happened is truly something that is, for those of us who cover politics, remarkable to see as to the political warp speed that it has been put together. Not that she has a lot of time, but it not only fell into place, but I thought when I covered Obama extensively in 2008 that this was a one-off, that no one could kind of take that
rebuttal, that energy.
Zest. Yes, but she is a phenomenal speaker, which she always was. People, I think, dissed her unfairly. She is who she is, but now that she is unfettered and she's the boss, you could see it. When you look at her speeches, when you look at her eulogy for Sheila Lee, Representative Sheila Lee in Houston, who, by the way, is the mother of Jason Lee, the top advisor in City Hall to Mayor Brandon Johnson. She does the stuff that these master orators do. She says a lot when she says nothing, but the crowd knows where she's going. I mean, that's the kind of powerful speaker she is. I'm sure we'll see more, but the money, the volunteers, every data point you use in politics, she has met and exceeded in a week, and that is a pretty stunning thing to see. And that will be reflected in the convention, which has been retooled to be her convention.
And we know that Biden will be the speaker on the first night, sort of give that appreciation and then move to the future. Decision she has to make, Greg, pretty much coming down to the wire, is who's going to be her running mate. And of course, in Illinois, we care because Governor J.B. Pritzker is continually listed as one of the options. What do you know?
Well, you know, the governor wants it. He's lobbying for it pretty aggressively. He's got the unions writing letters. He's got business leaders writing letters. He's kind of a long shot candidate, but you never know what happens because, you know, all 6 of them could have some pretty gnarly skeletons that don't come up. Alderman Derek Curtis once texted Lori Lightfoot, "The higher the level, the higher the devil," which is a reference to, you know, things come out more when you get higher. So I think that that we'll see. He's not the front runner, but you never know.
You know, we have, as Greg noted, all of these labor leaders, business leaders, abortion rights leaders getting behind Pritzker and writing letters to Harris, basically saying, hire him, hire him. Sarah, why are they doing this?
Well, I think they're doing it because he has a pretty good record in Illinois of meeting a lot of the things that they say. Well, Lynn doesn't think so. I think he's fairly popular in Illinois.
What do you think it is, Lynn?
The people that have come out, also take note of who has not come out, okay? This is not against Governor Pritzker, and guys, if you're listening, this is not personal, I'm just analyzing. So you know, people have business to do with the state. Planned Parenthood's certainly grateful and in awe of the kinds of things, most recently even this week, in protecting the right to choose. It doesn't hurt when you represent some special interest to come out for Pritzker, okay? So and also every other, the stakeholders for these other governors and senators, they've been putting out stuff too. Pritzker had a video that came out. I'm just saying, for people with stakeholdership, coming out.
It doesn't hurt. But at the same time, it's because he's been a very good governor on abortion rights. So,
yes. Well, but you need to make sure the world knows it. Yes.
Right.
They like him, but they're not going to step on his dreams, and that's the issue. They're not going to step on his dreams because then he will step on their dreams, and that, or at least that is the concern.
Right. Bit of a tit for tat there.
So it can be love and it can be convenience as
once,
well.
but it can be both.
He has been a fairly good governor for some of these issues. He has, and so I mean that is one reason. If he was a bad governor for some of these issues, even if they had a stake in saying that he was a good guy, they're not going to come out and say that he's a bad guy.
I want to stick with you on this, though, Sarah, because one of the people who have come out doing the opposite, granted it isn't a letter, but it's a very public forum. You have the leader of the Chicago Teachers Union, Stacey Davis Gates, basically panning him as an option, tweeting that she kind of questioning whether Democrats would want somebody on the ticket who is responsible for, quote, continuing the tradition of denying funding for Black, brown, working class, and immigrant kids in Illinois' largest school district. So, is this a fair criticism, and why do we have the CTU going after so publicly the governor?
Well, the CTU needs enemies right now. They're in the middle of contract negotiations, and they really, I think.
Why do you need an enemy?
Well, because they need somebody to, when they don't get what they want in their contract, they need somebody to point the finger at. I mean, but also, you know, I think that they thought that they would be able to get more out of the Pritzker administration. I mean, they say, look, he has the legislature, he's the governor, he's supposed to be progressive. Why is still the education formula not at the level of adequacy, or why is it not getting there faster? What is going on here when we have somebody who's supposed to be on our side who's not getting us there? I mean, yes, the money that has gone to education has increased under Pritzker, but it has not increased any more than the rate that it increased pre-Pritzker. So, you know, they are questioning that. And right now, they're in the middle of contract negotiations, and they need money.
Greg, briefly, is this a step that could backfire on the CTU?
Of course. Yes. You know, they need him for schools funding. They need him for the Bears Stadium. They need him for all sorts of things left and right. And that relationship is not a good relationship at this time, and it's and you know, the CTU remembers that he hasn't been helpful on some things they wanted, and he's going to remember that they trashed him on a national stage.
I want to move on. We've got about 5 minutes left, and very much want to focus on the issue of Sonya Massie. A downstate sheriff's deputy was fairly quickly charged with her murder, but we have learned that the day leading up to this incident that her mother called 911 for help, suspecting her daughter was having a mental health issue. And on that call, she literally asked the dispatcher to not send a combative, prejudiced policeman, and saying that, please don't hurt my daughter. I'm scared of police, please. Now, Greg, what is that call? What does knowing that say about this dynamic?
Well, it's the Massie killing is one of the most disgusting acts of law enforcement that I've seen. I think that law enforcement themselves have disavowed that, so it's not like a anti-police thing. It is a pretty bad one. And when they showed up at her scene, they were asking about her mental health. They knew that she wasn't necessarily. They knew that she had some challenges, and she weighs like 95 pounds, and she's a tiny old lady, and it's just a disgrace.
A young lady, I think only 36 or 37.
To hear that recording was heartbreaking.
It's really hard to hear. Let's hear from somebody else who came in town. There have been rallies nationwide, including in Chicago, where Massie family attorney Ben Crump was present, as well as civil rights leader Reverend Al Sharpton, members of Massie's family. And Sharpton said, when police stop someone, the first thing that they do is check the individual's record. And he says, why should it be any different in the reverse?
That you cannot be switching precincts. If you bad in one precinct, why would we think all of a sudden you had some kind of Damascus Road, knock off the horse, change your heart in another district? A bad cop is a bad cop.
Yeah.
So, Michael, what is your reaction to that? And I will also put that question to you. What is the holdup in a database of bad cops?
Last week I was here, and
myself,
and Rusty, we spoke about this, the need to really understand this, because thinking about how Officer Grayson in the past 6 years, in the past 4 years, he held 6 different positions. And for anyone that's
and it wasn't like he was moving, right. It was because he had issues.
Right, and then for anyone that's hiring for any job, that's a red flag. When you have someone bouncing around, they've had more jobs on average than years. That should raise red flags. But for the Sheriff's Department, it didn't. And that's concerning. That is really concerning, because also having 2 DUIs within a year, leading to a premature dismissal from the military. These are things that should be noted. And
so is this on the Sheriff's Department, Michael, or should this be a system, a policy in place so that is prevented from happening?
This is something America should address. And when it comes to law enforcement and all agencies, these type of things should come up, because ultimately these are the people who we are trusting to enforce laws. And we have a psych evaluation that's saying that, quote, Grayson knows he can move too fast at times. He needs to slow down to make good decisions. I read that as someone who's impulsive. And so as someone who's moving too fast to think through their decisions, no matter what training you give them, is that the person you want to trust to enforce the law and have people's lives literally in their hands?
To be armed with a gun. Now, might this lead to national reform?
Too soon to tell, but both Harris and Biden did put out statements deploring the murder.
And also Sharpton, by the way, calling on this to be part of the platform at the Democratic National Convention, and saying that both Trump and Harris, should there be a debate, need to bring this up, need to talk about it.
Watch for it to be talking about this kind of violence will come up.
It makes me think a little bit about my colleague Dan Mihalopoulos, who's done a lot of reporting about extremists in the Chicago Police Department, and how there's been very little reaction. They weren't put on a do not hire list. They were kept in their jobs. And, it's like that thought that there are people who are avowed racists that are going into community. I mean, this is sort of like the root of it that people don't really want to talk about. But I mean,
but really brings home when you have a mother of somebody saying, I'm scared of the police, and the very next day watching a member of law enforcement kill her daughter.
Yeah.
Right there. Right. I'm going to end it on that sad note, because we are out of time, but want to give appreciation to our panel today. That includes Lynn Sweet, Gregory Pratt, Michael Liptrot, and Sarah Karp. We will be back to wrap things up just right after this.
Tonight's presentation of Chicago Tonight, Week in Review, is made possible in part by Ann and Rich Carr, BNSF Railway, Francine and Dr. Anthony Brown, and the Mollenhauer Progressive Philanthropic Fund in honor of Ida Mollenhauer, supporting quality journalism. Chicago Tonight is made possible in part by the Alexandra and John Nichols family. The Polk Brothers Foundation. Additional support is provided by
And that is our show for this Friday night. Don't forget, you can get Chicago Tonight and the Week in Review streamed on Facebook, YouTube, and on our website. And Wild Will Klinger's back. Be sure to check out the season premiere of Wild Travels tomorrow night at 5 here on WTTW. Love that program. Now, for the Week in Review, I'm Amanda Vinicky. Thanks for watching. Stay healthy and safe, and have a good night. And Greg, want to get to you. You did a story about how Mayor Brandon Johnson's political campaign paid a firm that was also lobbying the administration. Is that ethically sound?
It certainly raises questions about appearance. I mean, they're saying we want something from you, and then they come back and say we want something from you too. So it creates the relationship that sort of exists all the time, because you always want something from someone down the road, but it makes it immediate and real, and it is a what they call the prototypical bad look.
Is it going to change anything?
Closed captioning is made possible by Robert A. Clifford and Clifford Law Offices, a personal injury law firm dedicated to preserving the dignity and rights of all individuals.